Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian. I know it's been a little bit since I've done a video in this particular format, but it's that time of the year. It's the end of the year, and I feel like a lot of people usually are used to seeing my end of the year wrap-up videos, and that's what we're going to be getting into in the next couple of weeks. That said, this video specifically is to kind of go over a couple of ground rules, or essentially what I take into consideration when it comes to my list. I'm doing this here so I don't have to start any of the videos with several minutes of going into that information. I could just link them back to this video, but that helps you all see what I think about when it comes to the end of the year, why I put certain things in certain lists, and things like that. Before we go any further, jump down below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, help me continue to grow the list as we're going into 2025. You may have noticed I've taken a bit of a break away from YouTube content, and that's mainly because the interaction that I have here and the community that's kind of building here is not as much as some of the other platforms that I'm on, namely Instagram. So I feel like the short form content videos is what I've been messing with more often, just to try and see what that looks like. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you will like to see, because as much as I love doing these videos, the production does take a lot more time. And if I can easily knock out several smaller videos that still get the point across about barrels that I like, or bottles that I think are good, that are a certain category or something like that, I'm probably going to end up doing that. But I'd love to hear from you guys. I don't want to abandon you guys here. I want to keep doing the content, but I'll make sure that it makes sense for my time and it makes sense from your all's time as well. Let's go ahead and break down some of the rules for the 2024 Whiskeys of the Year. So as we've seen last year specifically, but other years as well, there's going to be a number of lists. We're going to talk about craft distilleries. And with that, this year specifically, those are the ones that I feel like their traits most exemplify what people think about when they think about craft producers. Everything in the list is going to be craft, but you will see craft products in other lists. However, generally when I think people say that has a craft taste, or that has the craft funk, or a certain pot still type twang or something like that, if there is a smaller producer that fits in the craft category that has that kind of notion, you're going to notice it in craft distillery list. We're gonna get into my more widely available bourbon list. Now, those are gonna be products that we see in either wider distribution, or maybe they've been online and they've been available for multiple days. So if you're aware of it, you had an opportunity to buy it, didn't just immediately sell out. This is one of those lists that I feel like is kind of controversial to some people. But again, these are my lists. I just wanna highlight good products. I don't wanna make this super fussy. So we're gonna see that list again. We're gonna go into my picks and single barrels. And admittedly, this one has been trickier this year than in other years in the past, because I have not been buying a lot of other groups' picks. So primarily these are gonna end up being Seelbach's picks, or there's a handful of other ones that are either store picks or single barrel releases from a specific distillery we're gonna see on this list. But the emphasis always here is that these are brands to watch, and they might have single barrels available to you, to your group, to your market in the future. We're gonna get into my rye list. Now, I've tried to make some of the finished rye out of this category and into a finished list. So these hopefully are gonna maintain kind of straight rye whiskeys. We're gonna get into the rare and limited list. Now, this is generally what comes to mind when you think about rare and limited products. This is usually from Big Six distilleries. These are annual allocated releases, or just ones that generally are unfindable. They sell out a lot, even if they are in a batch. Then we're gonna move into the everyday bourbon category. The everyday bourbon category, as I'm going to be including it, may not exclusively be releases from this year, although they are releases from this year that I tried. There's some heritage distilleries that are gonna be popping up in there. There's going to be other ones. These are generally price and proof conscious decisions. Then we're gonna be getting into an American whiskey / not whiskey list. These are blends, these are American single malts, these are rums, this is brandies. This wasn't necessarily a popular list last year, but I feel like there's enough spirits that fit this category that I'm gonna do that one again. Then we're going to maybe do a rundown of the list, but primarily we're going to emphasize things that are in this distilled whiskey specialties / finished whiskeys category. This is going to be one of the trickier ones, because this one specifically hits to my palate, and enjoyability from the products on this list are also going to be that way for you all. You might not like honey finished whiskeys. You may not like toasted or double oaked whiskeys. They're all kind of intermingled here. They're all finished products in some sort of way. I'll have a general list, and then I'll have a lot of honorable mentions that fit things that I just overall enjoy here. Try to make a list of what I call RTDs, or ready to drink bottles of spirits in some capacity. Maybe they're blends, maybe they're not whiskey at all. It's just kind of grain spirits, whatever, but they're in usually bottled formats. And I didn't have enough to complete a whole list. You might still see one, because I find them really fun. I feel them kind of one step further away from finished whiskeys, but there are some really enjoyable products that I like to keep around the house, whether you're entertaining friends or whatever. So we're going to see probably some of those mentioned, if not in their own list, then in the end of the finished whiskeys list. Let's go ahead and start breaking down some of the rules or the thoughts in my head as I go through these. First off, I will say 2024 I thought was a great year for spirits. There were a number of things. We saw a rise of a lot of really good craft producers coming to really unique ages and just having a lot of great flavor. And we saw a huge rye presence. I thought those two things were the strongest of the categories. However, we're gonna notice that there were just a lot of really good whiskeys. I thought these lists were the hardest to make this year than maybe some of the other years. And while there are some barrels that do just generally stand out among the others, I think there were a lot of great whiskeys, even some that you won't see on these lists. It was a great year for whiskey, and I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to be able to taste through so many 600 or 700 whiskeys or so this year in order to narrow it down to the ones you're gonna see on these lists. First big rule, I put things in the category that I feel like they best represent, even though they might have qualifications that put them in another list. What I mean by that is something I mentioned earlier. If it has more craft-like tendencies to it, you'll probably see it in the craft whiskey list, but there are some other products. I think you'll see Still Austin in a craft list, and you'll also probably see it in a more widely everyday available list as well. Some products, they do just generally fit into a bunch of different categories, and the way that I break them down, I feel like it's good and easy to understand similarities with products in the list, but it's not all inclusive. And so these products do fit qualifications on other lists as well. I've put them in the list specifically in those specific videos. I'll probably try and mention why I have done that, but in case I don't, just know they might have qualifications that put them into one or more video categories, but they're in the list that I have for a reason. I've vetted these out, I've gone through them multiple times, and they're here for a reason. Secondly, unless it is the wider availability list or it's the everyday price-conscious, proof-conscious list, price is rarely taken into consideration when I put these products on the list. Availability is rarely taken into consideration when I put these on these lists. I know a lot of products are going to be hard for a lot of people to find. That's why I like to do so many types of lists. There are so many good whiskeys that will probably have been or are available to you all. That said, I don't want to discredit some of the really, really enjoyable whiskeys that happen on these lists. If you find something that is uncomfortable for you price-wise, or it's hard to find, or you have to scour secondary market now in order to find it, you do not need to do that. However, I want to make sure I mention those products in these lists for you all to know for archive purposes or just for me to have ongoing. I've done these lists for years now, and I want to make sure that I'm continuing to be true to the flavors that I like for you all to know whether you can agree with me as a whiskey taster, and just so that you all know that I would put this product up against other products as enjoyability wise. Third, when I start tasting whiskeys through the year, I start filtering them into their categories. It's not something that I do at the very end of the year. What that means practically for you all is that there might be a product, if it were to go head to head with another product from a different list, you may not see, let's say, a George T. Stagg on the best rare and allocated list, but you do see something like a J. Henry on the craft list. Is this one better? Probably in a head-to-head blind, you would actually throw all those details out. Yeah, it probably is better, but it might be beaten out in its specific list than this one. That's just the way that I break these things down as I go through the year, and I find it the easiest, instead of just tasting through all 700 whiskeys again at the end of the year, to keep what I picked out as I tasted it in its specific list and keep it there, and then move it on to the blinds that I do at the end of the year in their own contained environment. That said, you're probably going to hear about George T. Stagg and J. Henry, both in lists this year. Another point that I mentioned in some of the years past, but I want to drill this point home to you all. Some of the products that are towards the top of their respective lists are very, very far ahead of other products on those specific lists. There were a lot of great whiskeys this year, but there were some really, really nice standout whiskeys in their own respective categories this year as well. So keep in mind that some products are just going to be better than others in a list. There's going to be a wide variety from what's on the top to what's on the bottom in some of these lists. Last point, while some people only talk about products they got during the year that they were physically able to purchase, that they got as a full bottle, that is not a requirement for me. If I got it as a sample, or I have a sample prior to a barrel pick coming in, I didn't open my bottle of it, I will still use those bottles as long as I have a chance to taste them against other samples for consideration for these lists at the end of the year. Now, I will try and do a good job, if you're curious about that, to mark them with an asterisk or something like that in the lists, so that if that is important to you all, you'll have a way to identify samples that I might have on a list that is not something I had a full bottle of. Again, not so much of a factor to me, but I know some of you all might care about that, so I'll try and do a good job of putting some sort of marker in there so you all are able to notice it. And that's essentially it. I wanted to go ahead and get this video out, so this is the one I will direct most people to understand what I'm thinking about as it comes to these lists. I'm real excited to break down these products. I'm excited to highlight the distilleries that I'm able to highlight, and I thought it was a super good year for whiskey. I hope you all thought so too. Welcome to 2025. Let's recap 2024, and then we're gonna move on with some of the great spirits that are coming up this year as well. See you guys in the next video. Till next time, see you all later.